All right, should you use oak in a cutting board? It's probably one of the classic questions when making a cutting board, and we're gonna answer that question in this video. Definitively, final answer, and the answer to that is coming up. So first, let's tackle the reason why people say you can't use oak in cutting boards. And the reason is because of the structure of oak itself. It's part of a family that have open pores. So the pores in a hardwood are like the pipelines that deliver nutrients to the different parts of the tree, almost like straws. And the pores are in the end grain. If you look down in them, you can see that there are giant holes, relatively giant holes. And those holes go all the way down through the wood to the point where when I blow through this piece of oak, this is solid oak, when I blow through it, you can see the bubbles in the bottom. So the issue with oak arises when you think about the fact that these straws in a cutting board can soak up undesirable moistures. They can soak up meat juices or vegetable juices, and those juices can get trapped inside the wood, and then they can grow bacteria or begin to rot, etc. So that's a problem. And that is probably the chief reason why people say do not use oak in a cutting board. So is this really a problem? Does it actually happen? I mean, yes, you just watched me blow air through there, but will it really soak the water up? So I did a little experiment to find out what would actually happen. I took some oak and I put it into some denatured alcohol because it absorbs quickly, and I wanted to see what happens. Check this out.
I mean, look, you can clearly see how fast the solution is being absorbed into the board. I mean, it's darn near immediately a quarter of the way up. But here's the crazy thing. Watch the end grain. Within a minute, you start to see the moisture seeping through the top. At 2 minutes, it's nearly saturated. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't want moisture traveling through my cutting board at that rate.
And the question is, are all oaks doomed? And the answer is no. Not all oaks are doomed. It is just red oak that you don't want to use. So it's widely known that white oak, which is a whole different set of oak trees, is a rot resistant material. It's water resistant. And that is because the end grain of white oak has tyloses in it. And tyloses are little fibers, resins if you will, that kind of clog up the pores, and so it doesn't act quite like the red oak species do. So in the experiment, I put 2 boards like this in the water, and we watched it rise, and the biggest difference is in the end grain at the top. See, the red oak, the moisture came straight up through the top. In the white oak, it stopped. You couldn't see it come through the top. Now, that being said, you can see the difference in absorption rate too. So this is after about 5 hours of sitting in the water. The white oak came up about 1.5 inches. The red oak came up almost 2.5 inches. So a significant difference in end grain. A second aspect of the experiment is I left these in overnight. These ones were left overnight as end grain, and these ones were left overnight as face grain. And what you can see is that both in the end grain and the face grain, you can see that there's some serious warp that happened in the red oak versus in the white oak, sat in the same. There's a little bit in the face grain, but the end grain is completely flat. No change there. So come to the conclusion here, thinking through, say, a cutting board. If this were to sit in water or to get water absorbed in it, it's going to warp the board versus my white oak might not. So then I said, hey, let's take this even a step further. What if I were to take the oak and put it in cutting board oil? Does that matter? Does that change it? Is there gonna be any difference when it's oiled versus when it's dry? So I oiled these boards, I let them dry, let the oil sit in there and dry for 24 hours, and then I put them in the denatured alcohol solution again. Here's what I found. The absorption rate was almost the same. The oil treated red oak, a little bit less, but not really that much considering that it's oil treated. The white oak, almost dead nuts the same. But the big difference here was the warpage. In the oil treated red oak, we didn't have the warp that we had in the non-treated red oak. White oak, same difference. So the oil really doesn't affect the absorption rate, so I still wouldn't use this, but it did help it to not warp. So what have I concluded from all this? I've concluded that not all oaks are created the same. Red oak should not be used in cutting boards anytime. White oak can be used because one, it's rot resistant, two, it didn't seem to have any warpage. And it makes me wonder, would the white oak absorb more or less than, say, traditional woods like maple, cherry, and walnut? Maybe that's next video. Hey, I hope this was helpful. Until next time, don't forget to hit that like, subscribe. Peace.